last night I was talking about this let's get my camera set up. There's a bit of a misconception about driving external force with a magnet, and the problem with magnetism is it has a huge field which extends outward in all directions. I want to try and simplify it a little bit. I'll just zoom in a bit because right, so normally when you have a magnet, hang on, let me just grab a magnet. I'll find a chunky one. This is the chunkiest one I've got, apart from the smaller magnets I have, but this is a fairly chunky one I've got. The problem is, when you're in the proximity of any magnet, the strongest field that there is around that one magnet. What I'm talking about is, to achieve escape velocity, what we have to do is create a dead zone. So if I get another magnet, for example, let's just get these little ones. Hang on. So we get these other magnets. This magnet wants to stick to this side because it's the opposite pole to this magnet, right? And on this side it's pushing away, right? This side is pushing. So basically, whenever you have a magnet that's, you want to push, say, this magnet along, the problem is the two faces are too close together. So what happens is the field, even though you might push the magnet down in that area, the other face is very close. So as the distance increases, the field basically will start to create drag. So as it propels it away, it will slow down quite rapidly in a linear fashion, and it will slow down. So what we have to do is we have to create a situation where this face, say north, and the other face, say south, has a large gap between it. And the way I've done that is with this particular arrangement down here, because what we have in this situation is the south and the north in the middle effectively cancels itself out in the middle. So we have a bigger gap. So we have a better chance of acceleration, because when this magnet on the south magnet on a rotor is actually being drawn in, oops, when it's being drawn in, right, to this face here, and this tip here, this bit of steel around the magnet is effectively cancelling that field out between the two poles. So we have a dead area. It's a crossover point. So the only attraction we have at this point really is iron, but the south pole is pulling on the north pole. So what will happen is, as it approaches this top dead center point here in alignment, what happens is the north field will be pulled through this piece of steel. So more north will appear at this point when this magnet is directly above it, and the south field on the end of this steel will be suppressed slightly, and it will, so the actual axis of the magnetic field will shift. So it will basically tilt that field so that this south is pushed down along the steel, suppressed slightly, and the north field will be extracted slightly further to the tip. So there'll be a bit more north on this very tip here than there would normally be. Even when we put our screwdriver on it and it says there's nothing there, it will be there when the south field is opposite, because it's pulling on that north field along that it's pivoting the field around that piece of steel. So we need to have a stronger piece of steel around this area to make that a greater resistance to a much stronger resistance in the influence of that magnet, if you get what I'm saying. So we need to have a dense, basically it's like using thicker wire for higher current. You basically have to suppress that field at that point, but you don't want to short out all of the field, because you need the north field that's pushing out in this direction to be able to pull on the cell as it comes in. So once it crosses that point, this threshold point here, it gets into this balance situation where the south and the north are effectively short-circuited, but it wants to ride on the south field that it detects, so it's pushing itself forward towards the north anyway, because there's a slight difference. When you're at this end, it can detect some cells, so it's pushing on that. When it gets in the middle, the south becomes more suppressed. The field that was there is more suppressed because this south is pushing back against it. So like a rubber band, it's been compressed a little bit. So this north starts to become stretched, pulled out. So this south starts to pull on this north field slightly, because this is steel, remember, as well. So it'll start to pull towards this point here. So we have a little bit of a sticky spot at this point, but it's not much of a sticky spot. But once we get past this point, whereas normally the main magnet, which I was just showing you, because we're not using the full thickness of a magnet, this magnet here is less likely to want to jump back to the other side where it started, because there's a big gap. So it's no longer favouring this side, right? It's no longer favourable this side, or this. It's actually going to be more in favour of being deflected by this side over here, because these are two different magnets. So there's a magnet there, there's a magnet there inside the steel. So it's going to favour this one more, because this is a bit of a dead zone, more or less. So once it gets past that point, it's going to be deflected out and away. So we're going to gain more effective thrust and attraction on this side. So attraction on that side and deflection on this side. So it's going to be much more efficient than it would be if you were just using one magnet. Because if you use just one magnet, it's just as likely to want to jump back to the other side of this magnet and not going to go anywhere. So that's where you get your cogging. It just sticks and it doesn't want to go anywhere, because it's got too much influence, because the 2 points are too close together. So if you used a really long magnet, the problem with that is south always seems to want to be deflected by another south. So this is the problem. This is why I want to keep this south right over here, because you see, if this south here was really close to that north, if you see what I'm saying, then this south, although it's been attracted by this north as it comes in, as soon as it gets to this point, normally the south would push it back, because this south is pushing back against that south. So what we're doing is shorting that south on this side away to another north over here. You get what I'm saying? It's like a bridge. So instead of this south being pushed back to where it began, it doesn't really see this south, because this south's been shorted out by this north over here, right? So it basically has no choice but to go through. And once it goes through, right, and this isn't really sticky much at all, it will pass over and see this other south, and this other south will then kick it out. So that's where we gain. We actually gain rotation more, whereas we wouldn't have done if we didn't have the short circuit part in the middle. So anyway, I thought I'd explain that, because I was trying to get it straight in my head last night, because I did the previous live stream last night. I'll put a link to that previous one in the description of this one after I finished it. So I'm pretty confident that this will work. As I say, I mocked this up last night. It's really not much. There's not much to it. I also tried some other steel in there, which is laminated, so I've got a bit of plastic on there. So this is the idea. So if you look, if I get my screwdriver, there's actually 4 magnets. There's 2 there and there's 2 there. And if you get my screwdriver and I touch that, there is nothing on that. There's no attraction to this at all. Look, it's absolutely dead. I'll show you. I'll try and pick up that screwdriver. Right, you see, sorry about the shadows. I'll do it the other way around so the shadow won't be a problem. So if I get that piece of steel, it won't pick it up because it's dead in the middle, right? And it should be pretty dead there. There's a little bit there, and it should be pretty dead there, because the field in the middle is shorted out. But there's a really strong field on the ends. So if I go to the end, it sticks really well, because that's where we want we want attraction on one side and we want repulsion on the other side. So by having it like that, by putting a cage around it, which is, I suppose you could call it a Faraday cage of sorts, but it's a magnetic type, you know. But basically it's shielding that field, shorting out this field that we don't want. I use my plastic thingy. So it's shorting out the field between here and here, so this doesn't have much effect. So we've got the attraction on this side coming in, and once we get to this point, the part that normally would have caused it to push back to here can't, because it's been shorted out to this other magnet down here. So we can get across this midpoint, and then once we get over here, it pushes it back out at this side. So I don't know if I can show this really well, because it's probably going to destroy it if it sticks to it. I'm just going to hold my finger there because I'm not sure which way around. Yeah, I've got the traction on that side. So this basically should be pulling in, which it is there, because you can, I don't know if I can show you this. If I put the magnet in this cup, because I don't want it to get too close, you can see it's pulling on that side, look, there. I don't want to pull this thing apart. But when you get past that, I don't want it to rotate on me. Once we get past the midsection, it should push it out. That's why it's turning, because the field is trying to push it. I'm getting to the point where it wants to push. So if we get to this side, it's pushing on there now. You can see. So on the entry side there, it's pulling, right? You can see it pulling that, right? And once you get down here, it starts to rotate because it's wanting to actually push. So we get to the bottom section, right, and it's actually pushing down here. If I can bring it around, you can see what I mean. It's pushing there, look. So this side is pushing now. There's virtually nothing in the middle. So if I hover it, I'll hold my fingers together so it doesn't fly off. But basically, there's not much there, right, in the middle, which is what we want. We want it to pull on this side, and it's bending the magnets in my fingers right now. You can see it bending, it's pulling there. So if this was on a rotor, this would pull in without any problem, and it would go through, and then it would kick it out the other side, because I can feel it pushing out my hand right now. It's actually pushing against there. It's simple. You can make this up in a couple of minutes. All you need is some battery tabbing, some thin and 4 little magnets, or even 2 great big massive magnets. You could put great big magnets in there, but you need this tabbing's a bit narrow, so you need to have some really wide tabbing, really, to shield it properly. Because what we want to block, what we have to block, is the sides of these magnets. We have to screen the sides of these magnets, because the tendency is that the whatever you're trying to push along, whatever rotor you're trying to push along, it's going to cause that, want it to jump back to where it started. So you've got to shield the sides of these magnets, but you want the field there to short out to this one, and you want that field on this side to be open so it can spread out. I'm just going to get my viewing film, and we're going to see it. We'll look at this under viewing film. Just give me a minute. Oops. That's probably the best thing to do is to have a look at what this looks like under viewing film. So I've got a little piece here. Right, so, oop, dropped it. Can't really see a lot. Right. Try to get the light on it in the right direction. Oop! I keep dropping it. It's a bit fragile, it's not held together really well, so I've got to be careful how I hold it. Hard to see. Hard to see. It's because the magnets are... the steel's popping out. Oh, I've got plastic on it, haven't I? I forgot. That's why it's not easy to see. Oh, it's the lamination on this piece of plastic here that's affecting it. I'll turn it over, it might be easier, I don't know. This camera, the light, it's showing up a lot of dust which is not actually there, but it doesn't show a lot. I'm moving it around because it wipes it as you go around. Ah, right. Huh, it's not easy to see the field at all. Well, yeah, you get the idea. It's definitely worth trying that out, but I'm not set up to run a rotor off this actually right now. So anyway, I wanted to share that, so hopefully it helps someone. Okay, right. Anyway, I've passed it on. I've shared a link to the previous video to James Ronnie. I'll send a follow-up link or something. Okay, hopefully you can test that idea out. This arrangement with his big bicycle wheel thing. Be interested to see if that works for him. Right, bye for now.